I'm riding the historic military route nicknamed Hell's Highway. The name was given to the route used by the Allied forces in World War II for the main thrust of British 30 Corps in its part of Operation Market Garden, the attempt to liberate Holland and advance on Nazi Germany. It combined airborne forces dropping onto enemy-held bridges along a 67-mile highway. They were tasked with holding the bridges for 48 hours while the armoured units of the ground forces charged forward in an attempt to surprise the Germans with an Allied version of an all-arms blitzkrieg. In the first episode we learnt about how and why the route is being developed as a collaboration with the Liberation Route Europe Foundation, and in the previous video we commenced the ride starting at Leopoldsburg up to the first engagement with the Germans just south of Valkenswaard. We pick up the route at the British War Cemetery at the 44.8 kilometre mark. So this route was obviously Hell's Highway. Just down there on the right there's some foxholes that still exist from where the early engagement of the Germans onto the advancing troops took place. And unbelievably they're still in existence, but we haven't got time to be able to go back and have a look at those. The British War Cemetery, which lies in a pine wood, contains over 220 graves. Almost all of them are those of men who fell during the fighting around Valkenswaard. All of the men buried here belong to the forces of the United Kingdom. Always a constant reminder of the sacrifice that these men gave in Operation Market Garden. People from all around the United Kingdom, Welsh regiments, tank regiments. Of course this is a very international route and some fellow Brits here coming to explore Hell's Highway. Just talking about the use of apps to pass on the information and the points of interest. Very interesting to hear that you're using the very same app that we're using. What do you think of it?
It's fantastic because we used it to plan the route, but we've also used it, kind of on the fly, really. So yeah. We're actually tracking the monuments as we come along the route, and then we're able to just pull over. I mean, literally, we just saw this one, 2 minutes before coming up the road, and then we've just pulled in quickly. Oh, that's We've been able to do that because of the app.
So it's been really helpful.
Really helpful. Yeah. Oh, that's a thumb up for the app. Thanks, gents. Okay. Enjoy your day. Bye. On this part of the ride we're exactly on the route of the British 30 Corps advance. The only thing that separates us from them is the march of time. First bridge of Operation Market Garden crossed.
They only got here in the afternoon of the first day, and they should have been a lot further. And obviously the first thing they do,
I don't know, but what did they do? Cup of tea perhaps?
Yes, put on a kettle for a cuppa.
It was already dark on September the 17th, 1944, around 7:30 in the evening, when the British drove into the marketplace here in Valkenswaard.
So what's amazing is that there were 20,000 vehicles eventually holed up here in the square and down the avenues.
The village suffered a great deal from Allied artillery shelling and Typhoon airstrikes. Many houses were ablaze. The cigar factories, the then pride of Valkenswaard, were hard hit, and there were many deaths. But despite that, people emerged from hiding to cheer their throats hoarse for their liberators.
You can choose between some hot stuff.
Earl Grey.
Because you don't have to carry stuff.
Very English. No teapot though.
While British troops of 30 Corps hold up for the evening at Valkenswaard, the American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division continue their advance into Eindhoven. It's never become clear why 30 Corps didn't push further on to Eindhoven. Perhaps it was felt that the troops deserved a rest after the battle earlier in the day, or it was considered to be too risky to advance in the dark. It's even been suggested that perhaps the British Army was inflexible in its ability to reorganise after the battle. It later turned out that this delay at Valkenswaard had major negative consequences for the course of Operation Market Garden. On September the 18th, American paratroopers enter Eindhoven. They liberate the city. They've also ensured the advance route and the bridges over the Dommel are secure and open for the British ground forces. The Americans were a little dismayed to think that the British had halted their advance just a few kilometres south.
Unfortunately, Wout suffered a puncture, first casualty of the trip. It's an enforced stop, an opportunity to check the map now, see our progress.
We went over Joe's Bridge and we went into an easterly direction, and we came onto Hell's Highway slightly before Valkenswaard, which is roughly here. Saw the cemetery. And then we went up to Valkenswaard, where you had a cup of tea in the middle of the square, which back in '44 was apparently also more important than saving the Dutch population.
Well, you know us Brits, we like to know what our priorities are, so cup of tea first and liberation second.
No, joking. But and now we're in Eindhoven. So Eindhoven is where we have the first casualty. So our engineering team is sorting that out. The next big thing is SON. SON is very famous for the bridge at SON that got blown up just before the American troopers and gliders that landed in the Sonniuswijk just to the southwest of SON landed. So they marched down, and then after that they also marched down to meet the Brits at Eindhoven. So that was on the 18th at roughly 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're going to SON, and this is also where the 107 Panzer Division tried its first attack on the actual Hell's Highway.
Nice badges. Holland, the home of the bicycle, right? The mission of the 506th Regiment of the US 101st Airborne Division was to take Eindhoven and immediately secure the 4 bridges over the River Dommel. But the liberation has its drawbacks. This church was the resting place for the 101st US Airborne, having made contact with the British on the 18th of September 1944. Hell's Highway came right through the village here.
This is Hell's Highway.
Yeah.
Straight through here.
And then went up to the Damer. So
Yeah.
this is where my family lived. So my grandparents lived here on the Damer.
Yeah.
And then my great-grandparents lived in Aalst, where my father, so
Yeah.
this part. This here is Catherine's Church. Very, very, very famous picture. I'll shoot it over to you, of the US airborne troops resting here on the 18th and 19th of September, after they came down from the zone area.
We can't waste any time to kill Germans. With these words, Colonel Sink, the commander of the 506th, made very clear that there was no time to lose. After some German resistance on the Valkenswaard, the Americans were able to reach the bridges, but the liberation of Eindhoven was to take its toll on the people. During the fighting, one of the paratroopers commits a tragic mistake. Some of the resistance fighters are killed, who were shot in error by an American paratrooper. Now the church is the resting place for delivery riders. At the corner of the Airbourne Lanner and the John F. Kennedy Lanner in Eindhoven stands the memorial to the 101st Airborne Division. On the memorial itself is a plaque with the text, Eindhoven, the first Dutch city to be liberated by the 101st Airborne Division. This memorial plaque is placed in the honour of those screaming eagles who gave their lives in this campaign, and as a token of esteem and friendship for the people of the Netherlands. Even the benches are marked in commemoration. 506th Airborne Regiment, the 101st Airborne Division.
This is the 5th time that the Allies crossed the Dommel River. Wow, that's a pretty serious looking panzer. We're just leaving Eindhoven on the Knooppunt 98. This bridge was occupied or being worked on by a gardener at the time that the German panzer unit was approaching, and one of the panzer commanders leant out of his tank and he said to the gardener, "Can this bridge take my weight?" And the gardener said, no, it can't. And so the Germans remounted their vehicles and ended up doing a large sweeping motion. And that's a very underestimated moment, because the action of that gardener actually prevented the German panzers intercepting the Americans and the British at a much earlier stage than they actually ended up doing. So whoever the gardener was, we're going to thank him. Coming up to Sons Bridge. This is the bridge that was blown just moments before the Americans captured it. They landed just to the north and over that direction. And in the film you'll see the guys running, and as they're accelerating to the bridge, the Germans just blew it and it was lost.
Canadian flags, Polish flags hanging from those poles during Remembrance Day.
And there used to be a parachute, right?
Yes, they put it back, the parachute, in September.
Okay. So this was one of the major bridges that the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles had to take. They landed in their gliders and parachutes just to the north, and we're going to go and visit that location now. After the bridge at Sons was demolished, the 101st decided to go for their secondary target, which was the bridge at best a little further to the west. They encountered heavy enemy fire, took a lot of casualties. One American trooper, known as Joe Mann, he was seriously injured. Both arms were immobilized due to his injuries, and the intensity of the fighting, the Germans got so close they chucked in a stick grenade, and he saw it and he knew that his mates were going to get killed. And without a second's thought, he decided to jump onto the grenade, and it blew him up, killed him. And he really did take one for the team. A tragic thing for the 101st was that once reaching the bridge and having fought for it, it had already been reserved demolition by the Germans, who blew it, and they lost that bridge as well. Joe Mann was recognised for his heroic gallantry with the US Medal of Honor, posthumously awarded. While you're cycling along this track, you can't imagine the horror, the pain, the anguish, the suffering. Nearly 80 years ago, in such a peaceful and tranquil location. Very green, and the river has hardly got a ripple on it. Such a contrast to September 44. Beautiful evening. The sun has come out to greet us. We are at Joe Mann's memorial. The chap, the paratrooper from the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles, who sacrificed himself for his men on the 19th of September. The large bridge just over the way is now named the Airbourne Bridge, and that was the fated second bridge. that they didn't manage to acquire. So remember, they use the vectors and use the app, and you can listen to the story firsthand and get some extra photographs and experience it for yourself. So Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole, 18th of September 44. What happened?
Yeah. This man does not like to be messed with. Sorry. It's a joke, but there's a part true in it.
Duh.
He was commanding his troops.
Yeah.
And he got hit in the neck and head, fatally wounded.
Yeah.
Right on the spot.
And he was commanding officer of one of the the four regiments.
And he's famous for really being a leader by example. So he really was a guy that led his troops out from the front. So he was somebody that people trusted very much, because he didn't say go guys. He led by example.
He led by example.
Yeah. February 45, after Market Garden. In the night of Saturday, just after 12:30, two British Lancaster bombers collided.
Oh my God.
Of the 16.
Kind of inevitable when you consider the amount of or the volume of traffic.
Yeah.
And this is one of the engine propellers.
Correct.
From a Lancaster bomber.
Monuments like these you will find many in Holland.
Would you look at that US Army truck parked up?
At 86.5 kilometers, we ride on to the paratrooper drop zones and glider landing sites of the 101st US Airborne Division, coming up in the next episode. Thanks very much for watching.